Dr. Trentinella, great to have you back with us to talk about Tintoretto and this marvelous painting in a dining room of all places.
Intended for the dining room, unfortunately not still displayed there. So one line of reasoning for art historical research is not just what the final product looks like or how a modern viewer might encounter it either in a museum or its current display, but where was it intended to be installed? And we do have enough documentation about this painting to know that it was commissioned specifically to be installed in a refectory, which is the dining hall for the monks of this church complex, for this monastery. And so there is an alignment, and this is not unusual at all, that a biblical narrative that involves food of some kind, a Last Supper, the wedding at Cana, would be commissioned for this kind of space. Presumably, quite logically, that while the monks are enjoying their breakfast, lunch, dinner, can look up and be inspired by or reflect upon similar scenes of biblical characters enjoying a meal or what the implications of the narrative around that meal might be. Further questions we might then ask, if we have the data available, is the degree to which the artist may have factored that physical location, or if the painting was a one-off scene that could be installed in any place. Unfortunately, the original structure no longer exists. It suffered a fire, and so that's why it's not in its original intended position. However, enough information about that space survived that an analysis of the painting revealed that Tintoretto was quite purposeful, that the rafters in the ceiling that he painted, the line of the wall of the windows along the left, were built as an extension of the space in which the painting was hung.
Fascinating.
He did not paint it ignorant of where it was intended to be displayed. He used that space to guide his setting of the scene.
So in other words, in a way, he's painted this piece to visually make the dining hall itself feel bigger.
And not just the architecture, but there's a subtle detail in the way he painted the table. The bright white tablecloth contrasts against the overall darkness of the setting, but in such a way that the width of it and the perceived length of it are slightly out of proportion. It makes that table read much deeper and longer into the space. It's a bit of an optical trick that he used to help enliven the space, to make it feel less flat as a wall, but one could argue also to pull the viewer's attention deep into the story, because at the end of that table, Jesus is sitting there with a glowing halo. So the table directs you to look in that direction.
So if a person were to look for this image on the internet, they will likely find a darker version of this image and a lighter version of this image. And you were sharing with me the history of the restoration of this piece, which is really important.
Yes, the standard high-res image you might find on Wikipedia, something like that, what's published in all the textbooks, would give the impression that it's a very dark, almost moody scene. And that would be, unfortunately, a misrepresentation of the original. So its current display location is in the Cathedral of Santa Maria della Salute in Venice. And it very recently, within the last 15 years, underwent a very technical intervention. They did some scans with very sophisticated high-resolution imaging technologies, X-rays. They took micro samples that don't damage the artwork, but they could run analyses on the materials. And it went through a full restoration, which means a cleaning of subsequent layers of grime or varnish or historical interventions that over time had changed the overall appearance of the work. It made it look darker than it originally was. So if you are able to see it in its current display in the Basilica, it looks much, much brighter than anything a publication or the normal photographs would suggest. You can see so much more detail in the rafters. He painted the wood grain. You can see figures in the background that had over time become invisible. You could see that he signed the painting at the bottom of a specific figure in the near foreground on the left in a vibrant yellow-orange outfit. Art historians have analyzed that face and recognize it might be a self-portrait of the artist. Not unusual at the time, but the technical analysis, the most fascinating thing I learned in prepping for this was that the analysis revealed hundreds of years, perhaps, of calling this an oil on canvas painting. We were wrong. It is not oil. An analysis of the materials revealed that it is made of egg tempera. We've called it oil because it was kind of shiny and looked to be oil. But prior to modern technologies of conservation, it would have been quite dangerous to try to take a sample. We would have ended up destroying the work or damaging it. And so no one had done that kind of work until the technology has caught up with our curiosity.
So just like we do biblical scholarship to try to get back to the original intent of the stories as they were first circulated, we can do the same thing with the way these stories were visually represented through artistic media.
Yes, there's so many different approaches. I tell my students, it's choose your own adventure. Decide as a scholar what you might most be interested in. Is it the patronage, the original display context? You can pursue that. If it's the technical materials or approach for creating the object, we now have technologies that allow us non-destructively to study these objects and figure out things that we've always been curious about, but perhaps not had the ability to investigate.
And you said that there is an idea that Tintoretto himself painted a self-portrait into this painting, which was not unusual.
Not unusual at the time. There are different traditions for this depending on culture or expectation and also the venue, what type of artwork, what type of painting, where would it be? There's a very long tradition of what are called donor portraits. The, let's say, wealthy individuals who are hiring a painter to create a devotional image will perhaps not be incorporated into the biblical scene. There are many examples of the patrons being portrayed outside the event within the artwork, but not as part of the narrative. And then other artists will insert their self-portraits, dress themselves up as a character in the scene. It's unique perhaps to each artist, to each situation. One thing, if you can notice that the figure that's being labeled as perhaps a Tintoretto self-portrait, he is not looking out to the viewer. He's participating in the event. And so that would have been a choice. If that truly is a self-portrait, then that's a definite choice by the artist to make himself a character in the narrative.
Dr. Trentinella, thank you for bringing Tintoretto's beautiful painting to life for us.
Happy.